So, time then for the press preview. It's our first look at the front pages. And tonight, I'm joined by the journalist and author Rachel Shabi and the associate editor for politics at the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope. They'll be with us from now until midnight. Very happy New Year to both of you. We'll chat in a minute. We'll have a look at the front pages first of all, though, starting with the Times. Millions will shun trains forever, reads their front page, as they say a generation of passengers will be put off train travel due to recent strikes. While the Eye reports that the NHS faces 3 months of turmoil amid long waits and shortages. The Mirror leads with the same story. Its headline, Future of NHS is on a knife edge. The FT leads on economists predicting this UK recession will be the deepest and longest yet. While the Daily Mail looks at comments made by Prince Harry about the royal family. Its headline, Harry, I'd like my father and brother back. And the Daily Telegraph has this same headline as it reports that the Duke of Sussex has claimed the King and Prince of Wales are unwilling to reconcile with him. As you can see, it's also the front of the Sun, I want dad and brother back. And Pine Dining reads the front of the Daily Star. And don't forget, by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us discussing them. And I'm joined tonight by journalist and author Rachel Shabi and associate editor for politics at the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope. Great to see you both as, we're all preparing to go back to work, kids preparing to go back to school after the festivities are over. And boy, doesn't it feel like the decorations have come down, the fun has ended. And the misery continues, really, especially when it comes to the NHS, Rachel. The front page of the Eye, NHS faces 3 months of turmoil. Some are predicting it's going to be much more than that.
Absolutely. And we've had some really grim stories about the NHS over the last few days, with reports that between 300 to 500 people are dying due to lack of access to accident and emergency, which, like other parts of the NHS and social care, is completely broken. And it's, we all rely on the NHS, and most of us have people in our lives who are elderly and vulnerable, and the thought of them not being able to get the care that they might need should anything, heaven forbid, happen to them is absolutely terrifying. And that is exactly the situation that so many people up and down this country are facing. We're hearing all kinds of grim reports from doctors and nurses and frontline workers, ambulance workers, about the desperation of having people wait in ambulances for 12 to 18 hours because A&E is backed up, or lying in their own urine because they're waiting for beds to free up at A&E and outside of A&E. There is a critical shortage of staff, of beds, of funding, and of social care, and it is absolutely crippling the NHS system, which we all believe in and we all want to support, but the government does not seem to be prepared to give it the funding and the investment that it needs right now.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the government would say it's giving up to 14 billion additional funding over the next 2 years and an extra 500 million pounds to speed up hospital discharge and free up beds, Christopher. But whichever way you look at it, 75 years old this year, the NHS, and it's really showing signs of its age. What did you make of those comments from the Royal College of Emergency Medicine today, that between 300 and 500 people a week are dying as a result of the problems the NHS is facing? I mean, it's become a bit of a political hot potato, that figure, hasn't it?
That's right. And it's difficult to understand the chaos which is engulfing the NHS. It's maybe a bit confusing to some viewers, because last week it was the nurses, or 2 weeks ago, the nurses going on strike. This has nothing to do with that at all. This is about the overwhelming impact of COVID, more serious cases, flu, also overwhelming parts of the NHS. And we seem to be on a kind of a loop of just crisis, more money, new crisis, more money. And we argue, the Telegraph argues in our leader column tomorrow, that it's time probably for MPs, leaders of all parties to get together to find a new solution for the NHS. Now, the Tory party has seen the NHS as a live rail, not to go near, not to touch, since about 2006 when David Cameron came in, because much of the privatisation of the NHS happened under Tony Blair and little of it, or not as much as Labour, happened under the Tory party. But I wonder whether all this may go towards some form of royal commission to consider the future of funding, whether you have a way for some people to pay for care, to get preferential access. Others will hate that, but that may be the answer, to try and get more money into it, or even charging for appointments, a low rate. So if you miss an appointment, you get charged, because the missed appointments cost the NHS so much. Whether this model is fit for the 21st century, I think, is the new idea, I think, we'll see in currency in the first 6 months of this year.
Yeah, Rachel's shaking her head there. We're running short of time, Rachel, so perhaps we'll explore that further in the next hour, if that's all right, because I just want to move on to another story that's a hangover from 2022. Prince Harry and his woes, front of the Daily Telegraph. I want my father and brother back, Rachel. Is he going about it the right way, do you think? 2 more TV interviews and a book?
Well, he obviously still has things left to say. And as you say, he's got a book out to promote. And so he has done these 2 TV interviews that I think are both coming out over the next few days or on Sunday. One is in the UK with ITV, and one, I believe, is in the US with
CBS.
That's right. Yeah. So he's trailing these 2 interviews, and we've seen clips from them. And part of the discussion is around how, he's part of an institution, the royal family, but actually what he wants to be a part of is this family that he is now estranged from. And sure, I've no doubt that on a personal level, it must be very, very painful for him and for Meghan to be so estranged from this family, and for him to be estranged from both his brother and his father.
Chris, front page of the Daily Mail as well. Harry, I'd like my father and brother back. Pretty much the same headline as the Telegraph. What's interesting is the Oprah Winfrey interview was widely seen as not much of a grilling, in the sense that we know she's friends with the couple. But Tom Bradbury and Anderson Cooper are pretty hard-hitting journalists. I mean, they're not going to give him an easy ride. And actually, what he says in those interviews may be more interesting than what actually he says in the book.
Well, yes, we don't know what's in the book until next week. I'm intrigued, by the way, how these papers split. You have the left-leaning Mirror, the Eye, focusing on the crisis engulfing and the Times also looking at an idea we'll see later about the trains, but the crisis in public services. Other papers trying to change the subject. The Daily Mail talking here about Harry. The Sun also talking about Harry. We've gone for Harry. But I think people it's so grim out there. Trying to get back to work tomorrow will be very hard with the train strikes. I think people want to see other news that will maybe just not about the chaos in the country at the moment. And I can see why some people have chosen to go with the Harry drama, which will run now all week. Daily will have more bits of these 2 interviews being released from ITV and CBS in America. And I think, there was that we hear for the weekend papers that there'll be lots of attacks on the Prince of Wales, Prince William, when the book comes out. And here's Harry being conciliatory. He may think that the book may be Harry going early on the conciliatory message because he knows how bad the book will be next week. That's what I'd worry about.
Yeah, and just quickly, Christopher, do you think it's the right approach by the King and William to stay silent on all of this?
I think they've got to. I think it'll bring them down to the level of rowing about he said, and she said, and what they said at the same time. And you get into a row about the record, comparing the record. And I think that's really not where you want to be if you're the royal family. I think he is running out of ammo. He can't keep saying the same thing and keep making money. The hope is that this is really the last salvo from Harry and Meghan, although there was rumours the weekend of Meghan writing her own book, which could have a whole different level of controversy. But I think the hope is it will go away. I think that the Harry drama is something to talk about, which isn't about the public sector failures at the moment. And that's quite maybe cheering as we try and get through this difficult week.
OK, difficult week when it comes to strikes as well, especially on the rails, Rachel. More strikes tomorrow and again on Friday. The RMT staging 2 walkouts. And millions will shun trains forever, according to the Times. And when we have got used to not taking trains, haven't we, during the pandemic? And is that a habit that's going to stay?
I'm really not sure about that. Look, I think this is just part of a broad attempt we've seen over the last few months in many of the newspapers, and including the Times, to basically blame the rail workers and the rail unions for these strikes. The trouble is that overwhelmingly we have public support for most public sector workers, and it is holding up for the rail workers as well. And we've just heard from the RMT that actually, they say the government is holding up the potential for negotiations there and the capacity to reach a deal. It's interesting that in the polling so far, it does show public sympathies are very much in line with that, i.e. they overwhelmingly blame the government plus the rail companies rather than the unions for the strikes. And I think we're going to see this as a problem going forward with all the public sector strikes. The problem being that the public sympathy is very much with public sector workers, particularly coming out of the pandemic, where we, have this intense feeling of gratitude forged for such workers, from health workers to postal workers, but also we're all in this same cost of living crisis. So really, when the government and the papers are attacking striking workers, they're actually attacking all of us.
Chris, how long do you think public sympathy that Rachel was talking about will last if these strikes carry on and on into the year?
I'm not sure it's even there as much as Rachel says. I think the nurses are the most politically difficult group to oppose for the government. I think on this issue with the rail unions, and people can see how you can't afford to pay these large pay increases. I'm hit by the strikes tomorrow. My last train back from London tomorrow afternoon is 5:15. I've got to make arrangements to work from home. I can because I'm a journalist. Other people can't. It does hurt people. It hurts people across the board. Emergency service workers can't get into work if they commute tomorrow evening. I mean, it's going to be hard all this week in London, of course, around the country. There are other strike action as well. I'm not sure this idea that there's sympathy for some of these strikers is there. I do think, though, that this messaging here to the Times is probably right. People will think, well, they'll give up on trains. I find trains very convenient, but if the train service isn't reliable, you make other arrangements, and that will increasingly happen.
All right, Christopher, Rachel, thank you both for the moment. We'll chat again in a second. Coming up after the break, warm weather hits ski slopes as snow dries up. We'll take a look at that story after the break. Hello again. Rachel and Christopher are still with us. Rachel, front of the Financial Times. I think it was the CBI, wasn't it, at the beginning of December, said we were heading for a short and shallow recession. But according to the FT, they've spoken to more than 100 economists, and it's a different story.
That's right. This is a pretty grim story to start the new year, where they have, as you say, spoken to 100 UK economists, asking them for forecasts for the year. And they show that the UK GDP is shrinking just at a faster rate, and the recovery is slower in 2023. So they spoke to one economist who said, well, look, the UK GDP is shrinking by 1% in 2023. Compare that to the Eurozone, where it's shrinking by just 0.1%, or to the US, which has growth of 0.25%. And that's come from a report from Census Economics. It's also done a sort of polling across this range of economists, and the words that they've come up with for 2023 are grim, miserable, bleak, and tough. And what they've pointed out is that the recovery in the UK is going to be slower in 2023 because of policy choices from the government. So that's ranging from Brexit, or the particular kind of Brexit we've got, as well as not properly funding public services. So they're saying that the blame for this slower and longer recession is down to government policy choices, essentially.
Yes,
what they don't say.
Go on, Chris. It does make grim reading.
It does, very serious reading. What it doesn't say, though, I do know this is a personal issue of the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, is that the reason why we're lagging behind the EU this year is because we were first out of the lockdowns last year. So apparently, if you take a 2-year average of the G7, we're second behind Canada. So what it doesn't say in this article anywhere that I can see is that it is actually linked to the UK emerging quickly and fastest from the lockdowns early in 2022, further than and quicker than the other advanced economies.
Rachel, is that not a fair point?
It doesn't say that in the piece.
I know it doesn't, but I happen to know it's the case, or certainly it's the case at the Treasury.
Because Jeremy Hunt said so.
Well, because he's ordered some work on this internally.
Okay.
All right, okay. Well, we can discuss that more as well in the next hour, potentially. That's on the front page of the FT. Just want to finish with this story. I mean, this isn't going to... well, many won't have much sympathy, I guess, with people who are going on a skiing holiday this year. But for skiers who've had the last 2 holidays cancelled, Christopher, the fact that there's snow melting and conditions are pretty poor is going to be a bit depressing.
Yeah, very. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that Rachel and I are not great skiers. I certainly am not. I'd stick my bum out and do a dreadful snowplow turn, John. I'm sure you're much better than us, Jonathan, at skiing. But anyway, yes, skiing is not great with the melting snow in the Alps, and it's very sad if you like skiing. I know that when we were locked down over the past 2 years, there was heavy snow in the Alps, which no one could ski on. So it's completely tragic. And for people who are spending money on going out on holidays and hoping to ski this week, in the last week of the Christmas holiday, it's so sad. The French are saying it's as bad as Easter. They're seeing lots of people being admitted to hospital when you have people slipping over on slush and hurting themselves. And they're really even wheeling out mountain bikes. If you look at the main spread picture there in the Times, you'll see a ribbon of snow down the middle, which is like a road, and either side it's green, verdant hillsides where they're now deploying mountain bikes because they can't ski on them. It's a great shame, and it's a further reminder about climate change and why that really matters.
Yeah, I mean, there are records being broken again, Rachel. Switzerland had the warmest New Year's Day on record in some resorts, temperatures at 15 degrees Celsius. At Christmas week, the second warmest on record in France.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, yeah, I do not know how to ski, but absolutely this points to a wider problem of, this the Times and other newspapers are reporting that actually it looks like, ski holidays are going to become a thing of the past. But as you say, there's a wider problem here. It's unseasonably warm, so there isn't enough ice or snow on the Alps to begin with. And then in the summer, it's melting way faster than it should or than is normal. And so the combined effect is really quite devastating. And so this is part of a wider picture we're looking at. It will be ruining an industry in those areas where there are ski holidays, but also globally, we are looking at increasing frequencies of storms, drought, hurricanes, floods, crop failures. We really are in serious trouble.
It is very concerning, isn't it, as we start 2023. Those snow machines are going to be busy.